Let's talk about CarMax, though, here this morning. Shares of CarMax, halting or hitting the brakes. They are down following its latest quarterly results. The used car retailer reporting a massive miss on earnings as car sales slide and expenses rise here. And
a terrible quarter, Scott, any way you look at it, because all of the key metrics, they missed. And if you take a look at earnings per share, revenue, unit sales, all of them were below expectations.
$400 million. That's not a rounding error. That's not an investment in research and development. That's a full-scale transformation bet placed directly into the infrastructure that controls how used car buyers discover and buy vehicles. CarMax, the largest used car retailer in America, isn't buying dealerships right now. It's not buying inventory. It's buying information. It's buying data. And it's buying the ability to position itself between you and every other used car shopper in the country. And the moment this deal closed, everything about how you're going to shop for a used car in 2026 and beyond shifted in ways that most buyers have no idea is happening. Meet James. He's been buying used cars for 23 years. Cash deals mostly, no financing. Smart buyer. He walks into CarMax in Charlotte in March 2026 with a simple plan. Find a Toyota Camry, 2019 model, under 80,000 miles, under $22,000. He's researched the market using Edmunds. He knows the price. He knows what inventory should look like. He's confident he's prepared. He walks onto the lot and immediately notices something different. The pricing, the options, the way vehicles are positioned. And he realizes quickly that he's not just shopping a dealership anymore. He's shopping inside a system that knows exactly what he's looking for, what he's willing to pay, and how long he's willing to wait. The Camry options aren't random. They've been curated by an algorithm that knows there's demand in Charlotte for 2019 Camrys. The prices aren't random. They've been set to land at the exact top of what the algorithm predicts James will pay. The placement in the lot isn't random. It's optimized to convert. He doesn't feel it as manipulation. It feels normal. But it's not. Every single element of his shopping experience has been engineered to extract maximum value from his wallet while feeling like a fair transaction. What CarMax just did is position itself at the center of the used car ecosystem. And it's done this in a way that will reshape pricing, availability, and the entire shopping experience for millions of buyers. This isn't about buying stores or hiring salespeople. This is about controlling information. This is about artificial intelligence. This is about data analytics at a scale that no individual buyer can compete against. And this is exactly what's terrifying dealership groups that don't have CarMax's resources. Because what CarMax has just bought is leverage. And leverage in the used car market translates directly into pricing power. For CarMax, and against you. When James walked onto that lot in Charlotte, he walked into a system where 20 million other people's searches have already informed the pricing, where his own zip code, age, and credit profile have already been analyzed, where the algorithm knows that people like him typically don't negotiate, where the pricing strategy has already accounted for his entire shopping pattern before he even walked in the door. He's not smart because he researched. The system is smarter because it researched millions of people like him. In June 2021, CarMax acquired Edmunds for approximately $400 million. Not $400 million in cash necessarily, but $400 million in the total valuation and deal structure. Edmunds was one of the largest automotive research platforms on the internet. Think about that. CarMax already operates more than 200 locations, already moves roughly 800,000 used vehicles per year, already finances vehicles through CarMax Auto Finance, which underwrites deals across the entire market. And then it bought the platform that millions of buyers use to research pricing, inventory, and market trends. The concentration of power in that single transaction was historic. But most buyers didn't notice because the transaction happened quietly. Edmunds kept operating as an independent brand. The integration happened behind the scenes. What makes this move genius is that it's not obviously anti-competitive. Edmunds still publishes pricing data. Edmunds still gives advice to consumers. Edmunds still presents itself as an independent source. But now, every time a buyer uses Edmunds to research pricing, they're using data that CarMax has curated, interpreted, and positioned. The data is still technically accurate, but the framing is completely controlled. A buyer sees an Edmunds listing for average used 2020 Honda Accord, $24,500. That data might come from 10,000 recent sales. But CarMax controls how many of those sales are its own listings. If CarMax is listing Accords at $26,000, and that skews the average upward, Edmunds will show $24,500, and CarMax's actual listings will be priced to look competitive against that artificially elevated average. The buyer thinks they're beating the market. They're actually being sold at market. And now, 4 years later, the implications are fully in play. Here's the bigger picture. CarMax uses Edmunds data to understand buyer behavior, what people are searching for, what they're willing to pay, what vehicles are moving fast and slow. Then CarMax prices its own inventory accordingly. But more importantly, CarMax now controls what information millions of buyers see when they're trying to research that pricing independently. Edmunds gets roughly 20 million monthly visitors. That's 20 million people a month checking prices. And CarMax is now the invisible hand, guiding what those 20 million people believe the market price is. That's not a conflict of interest in the traditional sense. That's vertically integrated market manipulation at a scale that's completely legal because regulators are 3 years behind the business model. A used car analyst from Cox Automotive said publicly in 2025, CarMax's acquisition of Edmunds changes everything. Now they're not just selling cars, they're influencing the entire market's understanding of what cars are worth. CarMax heard that and didn't deny it. They acknowledged it, because the power was already theirs. CarMax's third quarter fiscal 2026 results, released in December 2025, showed the company reporting leadership changes with the appointment of David McCreight as interim president and CEO. But buried in those earnings was the real story. CarMax sold 794,355 used vehicles in fiscal 2025. That's one car every 40 seconds, non-stop, 365 days a year, day and night. They financed 42% of those sales through CarMax Auto Finance. That's over 333,000 financed vehicles in a single year running through their own lending operation. When CarMax finances a deal, they control the buyer's payment terms, the interest rate, and often the trade-in value calculation as well. A buyer walks in thinking they're getting a fair price. CarMax is already in the back running the math on exactly what monthly payment that buyer can afford, based on their credit score, their income, their debt load, and their risk profile. Then CarMax prices the vehicle accordingly. The buyer feels like they're making the decision. They're actually conforming to an algorithm. They're not a car dealer anymore. They're a financial services company that happens to sell cars. And now they own the platform that tells buyers what cars are worth. The concentration of power is complete. But zoom out and see the full industry impact. When CarMax controls what people think used cars cost, every other used car seller in the country has to price accordingly. Independent dealers have to watch CarMax's pricing and either match it or accept lower volume. Franchise dealerships have to watch CarMax's used car operation and either compete or focus entirely on new car sales and trade-in values. The regional used car chains that operated for decades, the guys who built their reputation on knowing their market and pricing locally, are being pressured into irrelevance by a national system that has data advantages they'll never match. A used car dealer in Dallas told me off record, "We can't compete with CarMax's visibility anymore. Buyers find our cars on the internet, compare them to CarMax pricing, and walk. We're just parts of a national market now. instead of having local advantage. That dealer was describing a shift in the competitive landscape. He used to compete on local knowledge. He knew what cars sold in Dallas. He knew the demographic. He could buy smart and price competitively in his market. Now, a buyer in Dallas searches online, sees a CarMax listing in Austin at $22,000, and the Dallas dealer can't move his car at $22,500, even though his car might be in better condition. The buyer will drive to Austin for CarMax because CarMax is known. The local dealer isn't. That's the real consequence of the $400 million investment. It's not just moving inventory. It's killing the business model of hundreds of regional used car operators. And there's a second wave coming. CarMax announced in fiscal 2026 that it's investing heavily in digital capabilities. 80% of their retail unit sales are now supported by digital features. Online appraisals, digital financing, at-home delivery. They're building what they call an omni-channel experience. That's corporate speak for we're going to be everywhere. You try to buy a car, and we're going to make it frictionless so you never need to think about anyone else. In March 2026, they opened 2 new locations in Tulalip, Washington, and Rogers, Arkansas. New physical footprint. But more importantly, those stores are integrated into a nationwide digital network. A buyer in Seattle can research a car in Tulalip online, have it delivered, and never step foot in a dealership. That changes everything for local dealers. A buyer looking at a local dealer's inventory online can instantly compare it to CarMax inventory nationwide. The local dealer has 15 cars. CarMax has 200 Camrys within 500 miles, and they'll deliver one to your house in 48 hours. Where does that buyer buy? CarMax is betting they buy from them. And the $400 million platform advantage is what makes that bet viable. The real power move is that CarMax is increasing its CAF penetration target from 42% to 50% of all sales. That's not just financing growth. That's building captive financing into their primary business model. When you buy a used car from CarMax, the statistical probability is now nearly 50-50 that CarMax is also financing that car and controlling your payment for 60 months. That gives CarMax visibility into buyer behavior over the long term. They know what you bought, how you drive, what maintenance you schedule, whether you're struggling with payments. All of that data flows back into their predictive model for the next buyer they market to. They know that buyers in a certain zip code prefer white SUVs. They know that buyers with that credit score typically default at a rate of 4.2%. They know that buyers who service their cars at independent shops are more reliable than buyers who let them run. All of that data becomes a training signal for their algorithm. And that data advantage, combined with their Edmunds ownership, creates a feedback loop that independent competitors simply cannot match. A senior analyst at Moody's told Yahoo Finance in 2025, CarMax is building a machine. Once it's fully automated and optimized, they're going to have pricing power that will reshape the entire used car industry. That machine is already running. It's selling one car every 40 seconds and getting smarter every single transaction. Look at what this means from the industry-wide perspective. The used car market in America moves roughly 40 million vehicles per year. CarMax handles roughly 800,000 of those annually. That's 2% of the market by volume. But CarMax's influence on market pricing is at least 5 to 10% because of how widely its pricing is referenced, and because of its integration with Edmunds. When independent dealers are pricing a used car, they're checking 3 things: their cost basis, their profit margin, and CarMax's asking price for the same model. A dealer in Phoenix doesn't necessarily check CarMax's Phoenix location. He checks CarMax's entire platform. He sees that a 2019 Accord with 75,000 miles is asking $23,500 across all CarMax stores. He prices his $23,400 to look competitive. But he's already lost because the buyer has 200 CarMax options to choose from and only sees his one car. CarMax essentially sets the ceiling and the floor for pricing in the entire used car market. They're not 2% of the market, they're 100% of the market's pricing reference point. And now they own the research platform that reinforces and justifies their pricing. That's monopolistic in effect, if not in name. The industry is also watching CarMax's technology investments with increasing concern. CarMax plans SG&A reductions of at least $150 million by the end of fiscal 2027. That's operational cost reduction. Fewer salespeople needed, more automation, more algorithm-driven pricing and inventory placement, more AI managing everything from appraisals to delivery logistics. Those cost reductions get passed back into pricing power and marketing spend. CarMax expects marketing spend on a total unit basis to be up year over year in Q4, fiscal 2026. They're spending more on advertising to acquire customers while simultaneously spending less to service those customers. It's a profit margin expansion disguised as growth. They're cutting operational costs while increasing customer acquisition spending. That's a cash flow machine being optimized for maximum market share capture. They're also building the infrastructure that will allow them to scale without hiring proportionally more people. Fewer salespeople means lower labor costs. Lower labor costs means lower overhead. Lower overhead means ability to accept lower margins. Lower margins means smaller competitors can't compete. It's a spiral. Regional competitors can't afford that strategy. National chains with limited financial resources can't afford that strategy. CarMax can. And once they've captured enough market share through aggressive customer acquisition spending and optimized pricing algorithms, they'll cut acquisition costs and increase margins. The $400 million Edmunds acquisition was the setup. Everything else is execution. But what does this mean for you as a buyer? It means the market you're shopping in has invisible walls. CarMax has access to pricing data and buyer behavior patterns that you don't. When you show up to negotiate, you're negotiating against someone with a much better information asymmetry than you have. You think you've researched the market by checking Edmunds pricing. You don't realize that CarMax owns Edmunds and uses their data to influence what that pricing looks like in the first place. It's not corruption, it's market structure. But it feels like corruption to buyers who don't see it coming. A customer named Marcus posted on a forum in February 2026. I checked Edmunds, found what I thought was a fair price, went to negotiate at a local dealer, and they told me, that's CarMax pricing, and we can't meet it. I asked why they couldn't meet CarMax pricing. They said, because CarMax owns Edmunds, and they adjust their pricing based on this data constantly. We price our cars in the real world. They price them in a data model. That response was devastating because it was true. The second implication is that vehicle selection in the used market is becoming algorithmic. CarMax's systems are increasingly predicting which vehicles will move fastest and positioning inventory in locations and online platforms accordingly. If you're looking for a specific vehicle, a 2019 Honda CR-V with under 80,000 miles, in your zip code, under $23,000, CarMax's algorithms are being trained to predict exactly how many buyers like you exist and price accordingly. Other dealers are just hoping someone walks in who wants what they have. CarMax is building the inventory that matches predicted demand. That's not sneaky, that's just smart. But it means that independent dealers and regional chains are operating at a disadvantage they can't overcome through human intuition alone. A dealer in Phoenix told me, we can't predict demand like CarMax can. We stock based on what we think the local market wants. CarMax stocks based on AI models that are probably right 75% of the time. That advantage is unbridgeable. CarMax is essentially building a crystal ball. They know what will sell in Phoenix in June. They know the color distribution. They know the age of vehicles. They know the price elasticity. A traditional dealer is making educated guesses. CarMax is making algorithmic predictions. The competitive gap is not narrowing, it's widening. The third implication is financing. When CarMax finances your used car purchase through CAF, the terms are being optimized for their profitability, not your benefit. That's not illegal. That's how lending works. But CarMax's algorithms are increasingly sophisticated about identifying exactly how much you can afford and pricing you at the top of that range. A buyer walks in with a trade-in worth $8,000 and a desire to spend $20,000. CarMax's system knows that the buyer can actually afford $24,000 based on income, debt load, and credit history. So CarMax values the trade-in at $7,200 and prices the vehicle at $24,500. The buyer feels like they've negotiated a fair deal. They've actually been priced at the absolute maximum of their affordability. 40% of CarMax buyers who finance elsewhere are shopping against people who financed through CarMax and are paying higher rates. Download our free guide, 10 Car Brands to Avoid. Links in the description. Over time, CarMax is going to finance a higher and higher percentage of its sales because their system is better at offering financing that feels easy in the moment but extracts maximum lifetime value. When 50% of CarMax sales are financed through CAF, CarMax will know everything about 500,000 car buyers' financial lives every single year. That data is worth billions. That knowledge is power. And that power is what the $400 million investment was actually designed to build. The real story of the $400 million investment isn't that CarMax is aggressive or predatory. It's that CarMax has positioned itself at the structural center of the used car market. They control information through Edmunds. They control pricing through market dominance. They control financing through CAF expansion. They control logistics through digital delivery infrastructure. And they control buyer expectations through superior customer service and brand reliability. That's not a dealership anymore. That's a system. And systems have advantages that individual actors can never match. The independent dealers who survived the consolidation waves of the 2010s are facing a different kind of pressure now. They're not competing on service or reputation anymore. They're competing against information asymmetry. And they're losing. The franchise dealerships are realizing that used car operations that can't compete with CarMax are just liability on their books. Their profit margins are being compressed by CarMax's pricing power, and their fixed costs aren't being absorbed by enough volume. So they're shifting strategy. Less used car inventory. More focus on service and new car sales, where they have leverage through manufacturer relationships. CarMax is essentially winning by default because the traditional competitive structure of the used car market is collapsing. The consolidation of the market into CarMax's ecosystem is irreversible. Once independent dealers lose critical mass, they can't rebuild that mass. Once buyers start defaulting to CarMax's omni-channel platform, they don't go back to calling around to local dealers. Once the perception takes hold that CarMax has the best selection, it becomes self-fulfilling. CarMax attracts inventory because buyers are there. Buyers go to CarMax because inventory is there. New dealers enter the market only if they can somehow differentiate. CarMax's model eliminates differentiation. You can't compete on data. You can't compete on scale. You can't compete on brand. So the only players left are CarMax, niche specialists, and dealers who serve a geographic corner so small that CarMax hasn't optimized for it yet. That means for you as a consumer that the market is getting more efficient and less forgiving. If you're paying attention, you get reasonable deals. If you're not, you get squeezed. CarMax benefits from your information asymmetry. They're not hiding it. They're just using it systematically. The $400 million investment in Edmunds wasn't an exception to their business model. It was a formalization of it. It was them saying, we're going to own the entire chain from pricing discovery to vehicle financing to delivery logistics. And now they do. The question for the used car industry is whether that concentration of power becomes so large that regulators have to step in. CarMax would argue they're just being efficient. Consumer advocates would argue they're capturing too much of the value chain. Regulators are probably 3 years away from figuring out how to even ask the question. By then, it might be too late. The market structure will be set, the barriers to entry will be insurmountable, and buyers will have no meaningful alternatives. And before you make your next move in this market, download our free guide, 10 car brands to avoid. It's free, it's in the description, and it might be the most important thing you read before stepping foot on a lot.